Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Satchidananda, Gaura Hari, Jai Satchidananda, Jai Satchidananda, Gaura Hari, Jai Satchidananda, Gaura Hari, Jai Satchidananda, Gaura Hari, Jai Satchidananda, Jai Satchidananda, Gaura Hari, Jai Satchidananda,
Satchidananda ki jai, Shri Raghunath Sankirtan ki jai. Okay, turn the screen off. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankayate Girim Yakripatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Gunataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhovya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. Which chapter? 11. So we're in chapter 11 of the 11th canto. We're in pretty substantially into that part of the Bhagavatam Bhagavad Gita. Thank you. It runs parallel in a number of ways to Krishna's instructions to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. And so where we are now is Krishna is instructing Uddhava into the differences between liberated souls and conditioned souls. And we need to note beforehand the verses from Lord Brahma's prayers that have been brought to our attention over the last few days. From the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, where Brahma is pointing out, among other things, says from the transcendental perspective, there's no meaning to the term liberated and conditioned, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the soul, any more than from the perspective of the sun, it makes any sense to talk about night and day. What's night and day for the sun? Wherever the sun goes, it's noon, right? So, still, so that Uddhava can teach, Krishna is going to is going to give him detailed instructions, and over the next few verses in particular, but the conversation will be extended beyond that. The discussion of the differences between liberated and conditioned souls will extend beyond that. But at least the next 9 or 10 verses, he draws some very clear distinctions between the two. Now, the setting, this isn't something that we've gone into. Well, we have. We talked the last time about how Krishna kind of set up this discussion of liberated and conditioned souls. Anybody remember two other sources for an analogy that Krishna used in instructing Arjuna? Not going to tell you what the analogy is. You're going to have to remember, and then you're going to have to see if you can remember the other two sources for this same analogy. So first of all,
two birds in a tree.
Well, the analogy was two birds in a tree. Okay, so embarrassment of riches. Anybody else? So the analogy is of two birds living in a tree. The two birds are very similar. One bird, however, is very powerful and very detached, and the other bird going like crazy, going after all the fruits on the tree. Gotta have this and that. Oh, wait, And so this is, Krishna drawing a distinction between the super soul and the conditioned soul. The super soul being an expansion of Krishna, is very powerful and is the Lord of Maya. Therefore, he's not controlled by Maya. He's not influenced by Maya at all, the external energy. The conditioned soul, on the other hand, is small. We're composed of the same things, essentially. So Chidananda. We're composed of as Maharaj likes to say, being, knowledge and love. So we're both spiritual, and essentially we're just as spiritual as the super soul, but we're small. So we have a tendency, and we're what kind of Shakti? Tatastha Shakti. And what's the Tata? It's there on the shore of a beach or a river. Sometimes it's covered by water and sometimes it's not. So we're very prone as being Anu, Satchidanandamaya, Anu, tiny anshas of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. we're very influenced by our environment. So, if we immerse ourselves in the environment created by the inferior energy of the Lord, then we'll go that way. And if we immerse ourselves in sadhu sangha, in an environment that's influenced by Krishna's Swarup Shakti, the superior Shakti, then we can go that way. Because that's our natural tendency. The other thing is just we don't really fit there. So, so Krishna is getting Uddhava ready to go to Bhadarika Ashram and share his teachings. Uddhava has to stay behind. We talked when we looked at the first 2-3 chapters of the first couple chapters of the 11th canto some time ago. We saw how this whole thing was being set up. It told the story of the at the end of Krishna's pastimes, he realized that the Yadu dynasty had to be removed from the earth because they're very powerful, as Srila Prabhupada said, being Christians. Because they were Krishna's family, no one could defeat them. Therefore, they could only be defeated by fighting among themselves. Prabhupada made this point very poignantly at a moment of crisis in his society. This was in 1973. So, but it wouldn't be good. I mean, they came to accompany Krishna to participate in his pastimes. And there's just really no business for them to stay. Because, after all, they're really powerful. They got this Kshatriya spirit going on. And who knows what, and Kali Yuga is starting. So who knows what kind of mischief could be started. So, as part of withdrawing his pastimes, Krishna withdrew the Yadu dynasty through this pastime of they're getting together for a big gathering, and Samba, kind of a goofball, deciding he was going to tease these sages. So he dressed up like a girl and took this rock, this kind of iron rock, and put it under the clothes and said, "Oh, my dear learned all-knowing sages, please tell me what it is that I'm carrying." And they just said, "Oh, that's easy. You're carrying the destruction of your dynasty." And of course, the Yadavas freaked out. They smashed the stone up into filings and threw it into the ocean, figuring out, and they did what they could. There's a little lump left, but most of it was just kind of like dust and filings, and threw it into the ocean. And they figured that's that. Like because the sages cursed them. They said, "Look, you don't know how to respect respectable people. You think you're all that, so you can go around making fun of even very sober, respectable people." So the fact is that what's under your address will be the destruction of your dynasty. And so they got rid of it, and all the filings washed up on the bank of something. Was it near Dwarka or something? And metallic reeds, iron reeds grew from those filings. And the Yadavas, well, as Kshatriyas are wont to do sometimes, got a little gassed, and they started a brawl among themselves, and they took these reeds and beat each other to death. And then that lump that was left was fashioned into an arrowhead. And we're not going to talk about that. Also part of the withdrawal of Krishna's pastimes step. So if we go back to the third canto, we see this is all kind of foreshadowed. There's a chapter in the third canto called Lord Krishna's Pastimes Out of Vrindavan. And it's like, fast forward, just quick previews, just quick clips of coming attractions, including that destruction of the Yadu dynasty. And then eventually Vidura approaches Maitreya. But in the meantime, Shukadeva Goswami is telling, oh, let me go there. Shukadeva Goswami is telling Maharaj Parikshit about this situation. So Shukadeva Goswami said, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was that the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth after dispatching his excessively numerous family members, and he thought to himself as follows. Asma lokaru parate maidyanam madashaya marhatyudhava evadha sampratyatmavatam paraha. He says, now, Krishna is thinking, now I shall leave the vision of this mundane world, and I see that Uddhava, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me. So as we saw at the beginning of the 11th canto, in those first couple of chapters, and then as we get through the 24, 25 gurus and get to the Uddhava Gita proper, Uddhava tells Krishna, look, because Uddhava's smart cookie, he's no fool. How smart a cookie is he? He's Krishna's counselor. Right? He's Krishna's advice, his consigliere. So, so Krishna takes advice from Uddhava. And so Uddhava's very insightful, and he's able to discern the future from the signs. It's not superstition. He's just it's just empirical evidence that he's actually noticing. And and he tells Krishna, seems to me like it's all over. And you're about to go back to the spiritual world. You're about to disappear from here and go to the spiritual world. Please, take me with you. And Krishna says, look, I need you to stay here. But first, I need to let you know just how you need to instruct people. So this is how detached Krishna is asking Uddhava to be. So detached that he stays behind and he goes up to Bhag Ashram to instruct sages there in transcendental knowledge. And then Krishna says, Uddhava is not inferior to me anyway, because he's never affected by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he may remain in this world in order to disseminate specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. So this is Krishna's plan. He's going to wind up his pastimes, and then he's going to leave Uddhava behind to give instructions in devotional service, how to attain liberation, how to attain and engage in devotional service to Krishna. Because Uddhava is actually a liberated soul. He's completely unaffected by the modes of material nature. So we've got 9 or 10 verses that as a core kind of deal with the differences between a conditioned and liberated soul. But because of time, I just want to take a look at 2 of them, verses 8 and 9. And I want to do so in a way that calls attention to connections. You all know my thing. Everything's connected. Right? This is how, when I taught my college and university students about critical thinking, I used semiotics. Semiotics to help them investigate different aspects of American popular culture. And semiotics is just looking at things as if they had meanings, if they were signs. It comes from the Greek semios, sign. So look at things and what do they tell us about the values of that particular culture? What do they tell you about the values of this culture? What can you infer? What can you discern about that? The values behind the way that culture runs from the things that we see displayed in popular culture. And there are 2 kind of guiding principles of semiotic examination, semiotic interpretation. One is take nothing for granted. and the other is everything's connected. And we can particularly see that everything's connected because there's what? How many things are there really?
One.
One and two at the same time. There's just Krishna and Krishna's energies, his various energies, right? That's all there is. There's the Swarup Shakti, there's the Jiva Shakti, and then there's the Maya Shakti. That's all there is. There isn't anything else. So everything's connected. But I particularly want to call attention because this is going to be a theme probably in a great many of my classes. Get people to think about these verses and how they connect with other things in the scriptures. So first of all, one thing that we can think, one connection we can see is we're talking about what's a liberated soul. Rupa Goswami gives a pretty good definition of the liberated soul, the Jivan Mukta. That soul who's liberated while he's still in the material body. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the second wave of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, Iha yasya hare dasye karmana manasagira nikilasvapi avastasu jivan mukta suvichite. What we call a jivan mukta, what we call a liberated soul, even while he's still living in this world, it's someone who uses his actions, mind, and words, and he lives only for the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That's also the definition of what else? Anybody guess? Huh? Well, yeah. Well, yeah. But specifically, Kaya Mana Vak. These three things completely engaged in Krishna's service. That's Tridandi Sannyas. That's the definition of Tridandi Sannyas. It's not someone who wears orange clothes and has a funny stick and has to jump over people's heads when he walks through a room. It's someone whose Kaya Mananvak, whose work, mind, and words, whose body, mind, and Kaya is body, mind, and words, work, words, and thoughts, everything completely engaged in Krishna's service. That's the definition of liberation. It's the definition of Tridandi Sannyas. You don't have to put on different clothes. You don't have to get a funny name or anything like that to be a sannyasi. Liberated soul, sannyasi is essentially supposed to be someone who's at least striving for liberation, living as a liberated soul. So all it really means is that we don't have any business of living serving Guru and Guru. It's kind of an easy way to understand that. Okay, so let's take a look at these. So did I look at that? Okay. So here's Uddhava. Here's Krishna speaking to Uddhava. He's beginning this discussion of liberating conditioned souls. He says, Dehastopi na dehasto, vidvan svapna yutoptitaha, adehastopi dehasta, gumati svapna vrigyata. There's a liberated soul, although living in the material body, sees himself as distinct from the body, just as one who wakes up from a dream sees that it was not his real life. An ignorant person, however, thinks the body to be the self, just as a dreaming person takes what he sees to be reality. So, when we're dreaming, it seems very real. What's going on in the dream is happening to us. And it can be very strange, can be very elating, can be very disturbing. And sometimes when we wake up from the dream, we might think, oh, wow, that was really cool. Or, you're shaking. Oh my God, and then almost immediately you realize, it's either, that was a dream, or, oh it's a dream again. And so, we don't take what happened in that dream as being terribly significant, because how much substance does it have? And guess what? By the time we're brushing our teeth, we pretty much have forgotten the dream altogether, much less what happened, unless it was a real rattler, something that just really rattled your cage or really got stoked. And you might remember, and sometimes you write it down, just like different people following different psychologists like Jung and Krogoff. They keep track of their dreams. It's not that they necessarily analyze it, but they pay attention to them. And then you've got the people who are into the, what's it called? Lucid dreaming. Where they, I don't know, I guess they dream deliberately or something, or they, I don't know, I'm not into that. But generally, we don't take them very seriously. We think, okay, maybe that indicates some interesting things going on in my mind, because there's all kinds of things, a lot of them that just don't fit together, that sort of come together in our consciousness. And our mind is, sorting things out, especially when we're in deep sleep. But when we wake up, we realize, oh, whew, wow, that was a dream. Okay, I don't have to worry about that. And if there are people criticizing us or praising us in the dream, when you wake up from the dream, does that matter? Do you care what the people were saying about you in your dream? No. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't have any substance any more than night and day to the sun. So in the same way, once we become liberated, once we become immersed in devotion to Krishna, we don't identify with the things that are happening to the body any more than the wind gets affected by the odors that it picks up, or the sun is affected by the things that it's evaporating, or whatever. We don't have anything. We don't have any more to do with those. And maybe that's the next verse. So in the next verse, Krishna says, Indriyaya teshu gunaya rapi gunayeshu cha Vridyamaneshu aham guryan navidvan yastva vikriyaha. Vidvan doesn't get all excited about what? A learned person who has seen the futility of material desires does not think that he performs the activities of the body. Any connections in that with that sentence? Think of anything else? A learned person who has seen the futility of material desires.
Tom, did you Pranipatena 326?
Plus. These aren't things that we're, it's not like, okay, I watched that episode of Monk, and next week is going to be another one. I don't need to worry about this one anymore. In fact, people talk about it at the water cooler the next day, right? They still have water coolers at offices. Everybody probably lives in their cubicle with their water bottles or whatever, thermoses of chai latte or something. Looking for these connections. A learned person who has seen the futility of material desires. I don't even know how many times I've used this phrase since we saw that verse in the 3rd chapter of the 11th canto. Tasmad gurum prapadyeta jikesha shriya uttam. Tasmad gurum. What? Therefore what? Tasmad gurum prapadyeta. Then, therefore, gurum prapadyeta. You have to take shelter of a guru. Therefore what? Well, what Bhag, I think, one of the Navi-Yogendras, has just talked a little extensively about the utter futility of all material endeavor. And that connects us, connects us to the 2nd verse of the Bhagavatam, which actually kind of has its roots at the end of Bhagavad Gita, right? Sarvatarman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vacha. Aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishami ashrucha. No word. Sarvadharman parityaja. Give up everything. Give up all conceptions of religion, duty, whatever. Forget it. We talked about this from so many angles. You don't want to cross that no man's land and engage those people on the other side. And you have all these really nice sounding reasons for doing that. But guess what? It just sounds stupid to say it in this situation. It really doesn't make any sense because you're identifying with your body and them with you. This whole mamata, pandavas, mamaka pandavas, this whole thing that we see in the very first verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Big problem. Us and them. So you're thinking, oh, you're this body, and these people are all yours, and then some of them aren't. That's that's where all our that's just where our problems come from. So then the Bhagavatam begins by saying, okay, now those who have already accomplished this, those who've already dharma praujita kaitavata, those who've already given up all kinds of cheating religion. And what do we mean by cheating religion? I should know this one by now. I do this almost once a week. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha, vanisha. Forget dharma, karma. Forget dharma, kama, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. The desire for those things, Krishna Das Kaviraj says, this is cheating religion. So that's about you, or who you think you are. Even moksha, even the desire for liberation, that's about you. It's a selfish thing. You want to be free from suffering. Well, who doesn't? Right? We wake up every morning, we hope, oh, my neck, I hope my neck doesn't hurt. I hope my hip doesn't get all stiff. Or whatever it is, I hope it's not too cold out or not too hot out. We'll get it out and work in the garden. It's going to be 95 degrees and 103% relative humidity. Whoops, and there goes T-Lock through the fence again. And we're all chasing him down the road, trying to protect him from the crazy lady across the road. So, sorry, crazy lady. So, these are things focused on, whatever concept of ourselves we might have, some limited concept of ourselves. So Krishna Das just, he makes it pretty clear, I reject this stuff. And the Bhagavatam starts by telling us, first of all, who's eligible, to appreciate the Bhagavatam. Dharma projita kaita, dharma praujita, completely. Those who have completely given up all cheating sense of religion, and whose hearts, therefore, are completely pure because they don't have any envy. They're not about competing with each other to exploit any kind of resources of material nature or whatever. Srila Prabhupada, when I read it, and I've said this 108 times this year, and I'll say it 108 times the rest of the year. When I read this sentence in 1969, 1970, in the report to the second verse of the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada says, not only do the devotees of the Lord, not only don't they compete with each other, because he explains how everybody's like human against human, and animal against animal, and humans against animal. Everybody wants what everybody else has. He says, but not only are the devotees of the Lord not envious of each other, but they strive to establish a competition-less society with God at the center. When I read that clause, it just, I'd already had my mind blown by reading through Bhagavad Gita as it is. And when I read that helped me kind of see what was going on in the verse. It's like this really complex verse with all kinds of things going on. And of course, when you read that verse, you've just gone through whatever it is, 15, 20 pages of the first verse, which itself is a lot to take in, especially when you don't understand any of the stuff that's going on there. But that sentence helped me understand, and it's it's kind of been I guess a mantra for me for the past 45, 46 years. So, a learned person who has seen the futility of material desires doesn't think that he performs the activities of the body. Indeed, he knows that the activities of the body, which amount to the senses contacting their objects, are going on automatically by the dictation of the three modes of material nature. Now, if you want to find connections in Bhagavad Gita and throughout the Bhagavatam for that idea, well, that's a really cool research project. You could put together, a whole paper listing all these things. But we can take a look at a couple.
I'm reading about it now. 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
15th chapter. We can find it in the second chapter. I think I've already queued up. I'm queued up in the 13th chapter, where Krishna says, Purusha prakriti stohi munte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangosya sarasadyam janasu. Says, living entity in material nature just follows the ways of life, enjoying the modes of the three modes of material nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Remember, we're Tathastha. We're situated in that place where sometimes the tide comes in, sometimes the tide goes out. Sometimes the waves come in and maybe sweep us away. Just like you see people, sometimes on the north shore of the Hawaiian Islands during the winter when the big waves come. You see the tourists, the lifeguards got their red flags all up and down the beach, which means that the hardcore surfers they're definitely paddling out or being jet skied out or being dropped in by helicopter or something, depending on where they're surfing. And then you got the tourists who want to go down to the beach and get their feet wet in the big waves. But guess what? Even the shore breaks sometimes could be overhead. All of a sudden, without warning, and they get swept out. They're standing on what looks safe, what looks dry at the moment. And then all of a sudden, a wave comes up to their knees, and they're all wet, and they're jumping up and down and giggling. And somebody's got his iPhone going. It's going to be on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and whatever else they got, Instagram or something. I don't know what they got going on, these kids. And then the next wave, it's overhead, and there they go. Lifeguards jump down off their towers, grab their rescue boards and their jet skis, and they go rushing out, and you got a whole Baywatch thing going on here. The interesting thing I watched some Baywatch. The interesting thing is, you got somebody going out, paddling out in waves about this big, in very calm water, and all of a sudden, they get clobbered by like an 18-foot North Shore monster in Malibu Beach. Give me a break. But stranger things have happened. So anyway, we're just kind of being moved around by the three modes of material nature. In a sense, we're doing it because we've made a choice in our association. We've made a choice to stay here instead of diving into the ocean of the nectar of devotion. And so we're going to get knocked around by the shore break that comes up. And then he says, Upadrashta numantacha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti chapyukto ehismi purushapara. Yet in this body there's another transcendental joy, who is the Lord, the supreme enjoyer, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. Now, do these two verses remind you of anything?
Two birds in a tree.
Two birds in a tree, right? Two little birds sitting in a tree. One is Krishna, one is me. I'm always in distress, trying to find happiness. He is waiting day by day for me to turn, look his way. And then Krishna says, Ya evam vetti purusham, prakritim cha gunai saha, sarvata vartamano pi, nasabhuyo vijayate. This is one who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction with the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He won't take birth here again, regardless of his present position. And there was another verse in second chapter. Well, it's a couple of verses, a little different. There's no way, easy way to get to it. The verses in the middle of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita with an A-reader. At least that I know. So remember, those the things comes on the screen. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Okay, it's getting close. Oh, okay. So there's some verses in the second chapter. Well, along the same idea, because Krishna is just, Arjuna has just asked Krishna, how can I tell who is a liberated soul and who's not? The connections are true. So Krishna says, Dukeshu anudvignamala, sukeshu vigata spriha, vita raga paya krodha stitati uchite. One who's not disturbed in mind, even among the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness. Remember? Day and night. Who's free from attachment, fear, and anger. He's called a sage of steady mind. Ya sarvatra na vishnehas tat prapya subha shubham. Shubha ashubha. Right? We know what's coming. Right? Shubha ashubha.
Auspicious and inauspicious.
Yeah. Nabhinandati nadveshti isn't hating anything, right? Tasya pragya pratishtata. In the material world, one who's unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Okay, got another connection. I'm thinking of another connection. However, you have to get up at a certain time of day to get this one. And we're reading in the mornings. I check it out sometimes. It's pretty cool what we do in the mornings. We're reading in the mornings from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we're reading from the 4th chapter of Antya-lila, where Lord Chaitanya is giving some instructions to Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami is protesting, and he's worried. You know, he's come through the Charikanda forest. He's got these sores, pussy, bloody sores all over his body. And he gets to Puri and he's thinking, oh, this is not good. Lord Chaitanya, for some reason, Lord Chaitanya is so affectionate to me that whenever he sees me, he feels like he has to give me a hug. And it's just gross. Just, oogie moy, just completely made of ooginess. So I'll just throw myself under the Rathayatra cart, get this useless body out of the way. It's just a big pain in the neck. It's just a cause of one offense after another. And so Lord Chaitanya gives them instructions that we've heard many times before. You're okay. Here's the thing. That's not your body anymore. You're thinking you're the material body. You're thinking that's a material body. I'm telling you, it's a sadhaka deha. And you've given it to me, and I've got things to do with it, so you can't go throw it away. It's not your decision anymore. And then later he sees Sanatana Goswami. He's come to see the Lord, and instead of going through, down the main road and, in front of the Lion Gate, he's come along the beach barefoot in the hot sand. It's Puri, summertime, Rathayatra time. Now, right? 120 degrees maybe. Maybe you get the cool sea breezes sometimes to make it a little bearable, but it's not going to make the sand any cooler. But Sanatana Goswami, he's going along the beach in the hot sand, and Lord Chaitanya says, "What is the deal?" He says, "It's just offenses. You got all these saintly people and Brahmins, all the Lord Jagannath's priests, milling around out in front of the Singadwar, out in front of the Lion Gate. If anybody bumps into me, I'm just going to be making offenses." And then Jagadananda Pandit, he said, "Yeah, okay, so you might as well just go to Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya won't let you throw this thing away, so take it to Vrindavan and do your service there." And Lord Chaitanya tells him, he makes a really strong point. Material good, material bad, doesn't make any more sense than night and day to the sun, from the sun's perspective. And besides that, I'm a sannyasi. I can't think about these things. It's not my duty. So there are a few things that are not a sannyasi duty. One is making these kinds of distinctions. Good person, bad person. I'm going to preach to these people. I'm not going to preach to those people. I was just thinking of something else and it just went away. It's also not a sannyasi's duty to leave remnants. So you can just forget that. It's not even a good joke. So Lord Chaitanya is telling you these distinctions, these don't make any sense. Oh, and besides, you're thinking that's a material body? I've already told you it's Chidanandamoy. Twice earlier in that chapter, Lord Chaitanya describes the sadhaka deha as Chidanandamoy. And he says, Krishna accepts that sadhaka deha, that practitioner's body, as being as good as himself, as spiritual as he is. So you can argue with Krishna. And he says, and he's going to say more late, tomorrow morning and the next month. But essentially, he says, you're thinking that's all oogie stuff? I think it's I go into bliss when I heard you. And he says, what's the question of offenses? Does a mother take offense when her infant passes urine or stool on her? She passes urine or stool and she gets some on her? No, it's her pleasure to clean that. Moms love that. And they produce Tom Sawyer stuff to make the dads love it too. It's like Lord Chaitanya says, that stool, that baby's stool is like sandalwood paste to the mother. One note, it's quite different for a new infant that hasn't been weaned, that hasn't had any other food other than mother's milk. It's a different substance from what it becomes once the kids start eating broccoli and crackers and stuff. It's like yogurt or something. Not that much like yogurt, but it's more like yogurt than we might be accustomed to. And then he says, Yada samvarate chayam, Kurmonga niva sarvasha. Indriyarte yas tasya pragya pratishtata. He's fixed in consciousness. Pratishtata, pragya pratishtata. Who? This is a description of liberated soul. One who's able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell. He's firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So we see descriptions of liberated soul, and they're very similar all over the place in the scriptures. It's not affected by good and bad, auspicious and inauspicious, hot and cold, winter and summer. Tolerates all these things because he understands he's no more affected by them than the sun is by the nasty things that it dries up, or the wind by the odors that it carries. Wind doesn't change because it doesn't change if it goes over a dump or over a field of jasmine. Jasmine, you've got a whole field full of jasmine bushes. The wind's going to be the same. The wind's not thinking, it's down by the wind. Over by the jasmine farm. The wind doesn't think that. The wind goes where it goes. It's not affected by it. And the sun's not affected by, the so-called good or bad things that it shines its light on or whatever. So a liberated soul is one who sees a difference between consciousness and matter, categorically different things. One's me, one's not. And we don't have anything more to do with that than wind does with the fragrances or odors or whatever that it carries when it moves. Not at all affected by those things. So this is kind of a quick beginning look at what a liberated soul with hyperlinks. Well, kind of, in my case, analog hyperlinks. That's what you might call the messy annotated books that I had. I used to show my students. There was one book in particular that I had my second semester students read, the same part of that same course, a book by a professor named Neil Postman called Amusing Ourselves to Death, which examined the effect of television on civil discourse, essentially. And my copy of that book was so marked up. Things were underlined and highlighted and underlined and highlighted and circled and asterisked and lines, catching whole passages out of the margins and notes. Sometimes me talking back to Postman, yelling at Postman, saying, well, that's just really over. And I would tell my students, yours should look not exactly like this, but don't be afraid to mess it up. You paid the book. You paid for the book, and they're only going to get, if they buy it back at all, you're only going to get $1 or something. So go for it. So that's like analog hyperlinks, and then sometimes those annotations are, oh, see what he said in chapter 3, or see what so-and-so said in some other book or essay or article or something like that. So when we read these books, we should read like that. We should look for connections. And if you're reading with PDFs, then you should probably have a PDF reader that'll let you make annotations. Do it. Highlight stuff. Make notes. That's what I do that. And if you've got your own book, I am cautious about annotating books, but I do it. Usually with it. Well, I highlight stuff, but then I use a pencil. Prabhupada once got a book, it was Karnamrita's Bhagavad Gita. This was in 1973. And Karna made some notes. I think he had highlighted and Prabhupada, oh, what is this? He's crossing things out. He's marking the book and he's crossing these things out. And he told that story of that impoverished Gita scholar. He got to that book, Yoga Kshema Baham, and said, oh, Carrie, I person wouldn't carry what they like. Nah, that doesn't make any sense. So then it was time for him to go out and beg. And he actually he was so poor he had to borrow his wife's cloth to go out and beg. And he had a bad day. Came back empty-handed. In the meantime, you know the story? Little boys come to the door. Very beautiful, dark boy. Comes to the door. He's knocking on the door, and he's got a big basket full of fruits and vegetables and grains and butter and milk and yogurt and whatever. And but he's very beautiful, but he's got scratches all over his body. So the lady goes to the door very shyly, and he says, "Here, this is for you to make lunch." She said, "Oh, thank you very much. And you're a very beautiful young boy, but who mutilated you like this?" And he said, "Oh, that was your husband." Because when he was reading that, he thought, he went to scratch that out. Yogakshema Vaham Yaham. And he wrote in something else, Yogakshema. I make it happen. I can't remember just what the phrase was. So then she's upset, puzzled and upset, but she goes and makes the lunch. The husband comes back dejected, empty-handed. But there's this big feast, and he says, "Well, what's that?" And he says, "Well, this beautiful young boy brought these things, beautiful dark boy, but he had scratches all over, and he accused you of mutilating." He thought, "Oh no, that was Krishna, and he really did carry what we lack. Actually did carry what we." So he went back and he changed. So Prabhupada told that story. So, but I do annotate my books lightly. It's like my Mathurya Kananda is pretty annotated and highlighted. And there's a couple of places where there's mistakes and I've changed it. It's like there's this one verse that describes Sadhu Sangha, Swajatiya, Snuktisya, and they have the wrong verse. So I've changed that in the margin or something so I don't get confused. Old Swamis be confused. Okay. Anybody have anything to add? Questions? There's going to be more discussion of the difference between the conditional sense.
I just have one question. So you brought up Srila Prabhupada is saying in 1973 about we could only be destroyed by ourselves.
Yeah.
What's that?
We should fight among ourselves. There was an implication. He didn't address it. He said he made this remark, and then gave a class. Something else. But because we were into the first canto somewhere, and it was about the Yadu dynasty, again, another place where that's brought up. And before Srila Prabhupada spoke, he just made that comment. So the Yadu dynasty, because they were Krishna's family, they were so powerful that no one could defeat them. They could only be defeated by fighting among themselves. And some devotees very dear to him, very close to him, left. And there was a lot of turmoil in the wake. And so he was concerned about that. And it was, partly because of devotees bickering among themselves. But he was, for those who could hear, he was cautious. It struck me very, because I was indirectly affected, because these were people that were also very dear to me. Anything else? More than that, we won't get any.
When you talk a little bit about, I'm not clear on this verse about, they say that there's neither liberated or conditioned. Sometimes the soul is called liberated or conditioned, but it's no more so than the day and the night for the sun. I don't get it, because it's like everywhere I go, well, I feel conditioned. And is it saying that one day everywhere I'll look, I'll feel liberated? I don't understand.
No, what he's saying is that it makes sense only in the context of being covered by the material energy. But you're really actually not. You insist you are. We insist that we are. I insist this is me. And you better be nice to me. Better leave me a piece of fudge every once in a while. You don't tease me with those pieces of plum and then take them away and I have a couple of minutes later. Because it's me. I'm me. Don't you know who I am? I'm the center of the universe. Everything is going on around me. Things that are happening close to me are important. Things that are very distant don't really affect me. They don't really exist. Oh, now we've got TV. You can see that these things are going on. But, oh yeah, it's terrible. Rwanda this, Syria that. Yeah, that's awful. But, oh, the women are in the World Cup finals, the U.S. women. So, we can set Rwanda and Syria and all the Greek debt crisis, set all these things aside because there's girls in shorts running around kicking balls, and it's American girls, and they could become the champions. So that's what we're doing Sunday night. We're not going to worry about the other stuff. Amusing ourselves to death. So the concepts of liberation and conditioning only make sense in the context of being under the influence of the inferior, Krishna's inferior energy. But when you understand that your consciousness and none of this actually has anything to do with you, you just are. You are who you are. Jiva spoke about Krishna and Nitya. I'm meant to serve Krishna eternally, nothing else. That's what it's all about. Karmana manasa gira, right? Work, thoughts, speech. That's a liberated soul. And that's actually the natural situation of the soul, of the jiva. The other is completely in that we're strangers in a strange land. And try as we might, we don't grok what's going on. We think we do sometimes, and then we find out. So that's the point that Brahma's making in that verse. It says these things don't make sense when you understand you're a transcendental entity, any more than we're wondering whether it's night or day makes any sense from the sun's perspective. Your consciousness, you illuminate wherever you go. Matter's dead, jada, dead, dumb, inert. It doesn't have life. But it appears to have life because we identify with it and animate it by identifying with it. But it doesn't really have anything to do with us any more than what happened in the dream has any significance in our life. Whatever those folks said about us in the dream, you're going to get up, you're going to brush your teeth, and have your coffee, get on the freeway and go to work. You got stuff to do, places to go, people to meet. And you're not worried about what the people said about you in the dream. So this is also, in a sense, a dream, because it really has no more substance than that. If we understand our real nature as consciousness imbued with existence, knowledge, and love. All you need is love. God is love. Vaso is sama. Does that help at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have to keep, I mean, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that because this is our apparent reality. Unconditioned, struggling to throw off that conditioning. So that seems really important to us. But if we understand, so, once we get that, though, once it clicks, once we have that epiphany, oh, wait, that's me, not that. Once we see the complete futility of all material endeavor, including the endeavor for liberation, because it doesn't really have anything to do with us, it has no substance at all. Then it's like things, you have a completely different perspective. Go back. So we need to keep hearing these things. Anything else? It's really. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Go ahead.
Swami Ki
Jai.
Who's virtually?